What's up, crew? Welcome back to Libertalia Game Supply. Today we're going to take a look at this Volcanic Invoked deck that I built. Currently, the pricing on this thing is a little over $100. Here's the breakdown for everything. Obviously, there's a couple cards that we don't have like rarities confirmed for yet. Things like Bonfire and the Little Knight, which I've mentioned before. We just don't know when we're getting them or what rarity they're in, so I didn't make a guess on the prices there. The things highlighted in yellow are pre-sale prices, so they're going to tank. So I would say, barring the cards we don't know rarities for, the deck's probably going to be decently under $100 once those pre-sale prices settle on the volcanic stuff. So fairly cheap deck you can build here. The deck functions pretty similarly to how the volcanics were meant to function in the GX anime, where they're a burn-based deck. All of the cards still kind of do that sort of burn damage or have some type of burn and discard type effect, but they do it a little bit better now. So we'll get right into it here. We've got one Volcanic Emperor, our boss monster. It special summons itself from the hand or graveyard by banishing a Blaze Accelerator or 3 Pyro monsters, and then when it summons itself, it burns 500 damage for every banished Pyro monster that you have banished when it's summoned. So if you use the 3 Pyro monster banished to summon, he'll burn for 1500. If you happen to banish some other stuff first, he'll burn for more. Typically, you're going to banish the Blaze Accelerator because you're going to send it to the graveyard for the Volcanic Blaze Accelerator. While it's in the graveyard, you'll banish it to summon this thing, and then it's essentially just a free boss monster. When it gets summoned, it searches a trap card, sets it to your side of the field, a volcanic trap card, so we got one of each down there. And then whenever your opponent special summons a monster, it burns them for 500 damage. So essentially what you're looking for is to set up this, and then set the Inferno, so on your opponent's turn you'll flip it, use the Inferno as a floodgate, and then every time your opponent special summons, they take 500, so it's a ton of burn damage at that point against like combo heavy decks. And so I've kind of built the deck around summoning this and then protecting it and then trying to put negates on board and then just grinding out as much as you can until you burn them low enough to attack for game. And then the other new cards, we got 3 Volcanic Trooper. This is a main combo starter. When it gets summoned, you can add a Volcanic card from your deck to your hand, and that's any of them, monster, spell, or trap. So it searches essentially your whole deck. And then it also has a discard effect to be able to give your opponent a bomb token, which is just a token with 1000 attack and defense, and then when it gets destroyed, your opponent takes 500 damage. So that discard outlet becomes handy. If you happen to draw this, you might as well use the discard because you plus off of giving them the token, and then you can summon it back anyway, or you can discard any of the other ones that benefit from being discarded, or just stuff that you don't need. I also tend to use this as a target for if you do end up looping the Emperor to summon it a second time, and end up having to set the emission because we're only playing one of each trap. The emission can then special summon this back to get the search, and then in the end phase put it back in your hand to summon again to get the search on your turn. And then for the final new card, we got Triple Rimfire. I think it's like supposed to be an upgrade of Volcanic Shell, which we are not playing because there just wasn't much use for it. But the Rimfire, when it's sent to the graveyard, you have 2 effects. You can choose to activate one or the other, and you can activate both of them once each. So if you send 2 of these, you can use each effect once. The first effect is it can banish itself out of the graveyard, and then it becomes a Foolish Burial. Usually I'm going to send this, but I suppose you could also send your Scattershot. And then the other effect is you can banish a Blaze Accelerator from the face-up field or graveyard to activate a Blaze Accelerator continuous spell or trap from your deck. So you could replace this with a new one, which isn't super useful. Typically, if I didn't need the discard effect to put this in the graveyard, or if this is what you opened and it's the Blaze Accelerator you're working with, you would replace this with this, or you would replace this with this because it gives you the extra draw and a discard. So it just kind of depends on game state, but this lets you do a lot of setup and like manipulation of your graveyard and your hand and whatever. So 3 of, definitely super good card. We've got the Triple Scattershot. When it goes to the graveyard, it burns for 500, and then it can send the other 2 to the graveyard to like Raigeki. It's essentially a searchable Raigeki because you have a lot of Foolish Burial like effects in this deck, and then it'll end up burning for an extra 1000 if you end up doing that. So I mean, if you used this, Raigeki'd the board, burn for 15, and then banished him to summon this, you burn for another 15. That's 3000 burned right there. It can start to add up, even though it's little bits of damage here and there. We've also got the Triple Rocket. This thing on summon searches a Blaze Accelerator, so if you open it, you're probably searching the good Blaze Accelerator because you can just activate it with this being in the deck. And then for our Invoked engine, we've got the Triple Alistair. It runs just like the Invoked engine would. You're just looking to Alistair, link it away into whatever attribute type you need to make whatever Invoked fusion monster you want, and Usually it's going to be Makaba, because if you can get Makaba plus Emperor plus Inferno on board, it's a pretty good board. You've got lots of negates, you've got lots of protection, and then we got the new main Blaze Accelerator, Volcanic Blaze Accelerator here, 3 of them. So to activate it, you have to send a Blaze Accelerator from your hand, deck, or face-up field to the graveyard. So that's why we're playing 3 of this and only 1 of this. You just want to open this or search it or whatever, activate it, foolish the regular one to the graveyard, and then you're going to banish it for the Emperor anyway. When it's on the field, once per turn, you can activate its effect to special summon a Volcanic from your hand. So it's a free additional summon every turn, which this deck definitely needs, because once you've used your normal summon, especially when we're hard relying on the Volcanic Trooper to start plays, as well as the Alistair to get our Invoked engine going, having that free special summon is pretty nice. And then it also has an effect to pop face-up monsters your opponent controls by sending a level 1 Pyro from your deck to the graveyard. That one level 1 Pyro that we play is Rimfire, which does a really good job of everything else, as we talked about previously. The only other level 1 Pyro that we were considering was the Shell, and Shell just, all it does is puts materials in your hand in order for you to have stuff to discard later, and it just didn't feel like it was worth it, but maybe you don't feel that way. The 1 Blaze Accelerator because it is necessary, the triple Bonfire because it's pretty much Rhoda but for Pyro monsters. I'm not sure when we're getting this. When we do, I'm hoping it's not a secret rare and like 30 bucks, but it probably will be, because that's how Konami is. We got the triple Fire Ejection. This is a foolish burial for Pyro monsters, so you can send a Pyro monster from your deck to the graveyard. If it's a Volcanic monster, you can get an additional effect. So either you would burn your opponent for the monster's level times 100, which is almost nothing in every instance apart from the Emperor, which is an 8, and even then it's only 800. The only reason you would do that is because maybe they're low on life and you're just burning them like a cowboy for game type of scenario, but usually you're going to be doing the second effect, special summon a bomb token to their side of the field. So they're burning 500 whenever that bomb token gets removed, and there's a few effects in this deck that give them bomb tokens. So I suppose in a perfect world you could give them 2 or 3 bomb tokens, then Volcanic Scattershot them for 1500, remove all their tokens, another 1500, and then summon the Emperor, another 1500. But that's really not what we're playing towards. It's just a little something extra. It all just kind of piles up. That's the point of the deck. Just tiny little shots over and over, and eventually it adds up to being a ton of damage. And for our additional draw power in here, Time-Rending Morganite, and really first and foremost, it's a double summon. If you open it, that's great to have that double summon, especially if you can open it with like a Trooper and a Invoker, or some type of a normal summon that can get you to a Trooper plus the Invoker. But after turn 1, and after you've gotten the use of the double summon effect, which is super useful in this deck, as we talked about with the Volcanic Blaze Accelerator earlier, every turn after that you get the draw 2, so just extra gas on the fire. No pun intended. And we also don't play any hand trap effects, so you're not losing anything there. So if you're wondering why there's no hand traps or anything like that, that's why. I wanted to play the Morganite because it's a unique new card. It fits in here pretty well, and within this build it actually works shockingly well, I would say, so give it a try. We got the 1 Called By because it's pretty standard, the 1 Feather Duster because there is no other back row removal in this deck, the 1 Terraforming to search the Magical Meltdowns, the 3 Magical Meltdowns to search the Alistair, the 3 Alistair to search the 2 Invocation. And then for the traps, we've got the 1 Inferno. So this is the main search you're going to get off of Emperor. So it'll set it when you summon the Emperor, and then on opponent's turn you're going to activate it. Whenever your opponent activates a monster effect, you can banish a Pyro monster from your graveyard and then burn them for 500 damage. And then if what you banished was a Volcanic monster, it can also negate the effect. So all of your Pyro monsters are Volcanic monsters other than the extra deck, and so you're always going to be banishing a Volcanic monster, ideally to negate, burn them for 500. Also, during your opponent's end phase, it can take 2 of your Volcanic monsters and take them out of the graveyard or banish zone and put them back on the bottom of your deck in whatever order. Order doesn't really matter there. But that's super useful in a lot of ways. So obviously the 1 negate of an effect per turn is great. Also, you can recycle your Rimfires and your Scatter Shots by putting them back in your deck, and then you get the additional, search effects and activation effects. You get the additional burn effects. If you reset everything, you can get the additional Raigeki. But really, more than anything, you can reset all your little stuff, but if they try to banish your Emperor to remove it, you just put it back. If it goes to the graveyard, you just summon it out of the graveyard. So this is pretty useful in making sure this can continually come back over and over, because we really want this on the board at all times. Then we've got the one Volcanic Emission. It's the normal trap. This one's definitely less good, but as a second option after you've already activated your Inferno, it's pretty nice. When it's activated, you have an option between two effects. The first one is you can take a Volcanic out of your deck and either special summon it or add it to your hand, and then during the end phase, if you special summoned it, it will go back to your hand anyway. So typically what I'm going to do, set this, activate, special summon the Trooper. Trooper is going to search something, and then it'll get bounced to my hand, and then on my next turn, summon it again, you get another search. Nice little plus there, I suppose I would call it. The other effect, probably much less good. Target a pyro monster on the field, inflict damage to your opponent equal to that monster's original attack, or if you targeted a monster you control, that damage is halved. Most other people are not going to be playing pyro monsters unless they're playing this exact deck. I don't think that there are many other pyro-based decks in the game. That effect is usually not going to be the one I ever select. The only time it would be relevant is kind of similar to this, where if you're just trying to like burn for game, you could just, I guess, technically do this and burn them for 1550, which is a little bit of a bigger damage burn there, but really you're just looking for that special summon search effect, looping it that way. Then we've got the one Blaze Accelerator Reload. This card's name becomes Tri-Blaze Accelerator while it's in the spell and trap zone. Once per turn, you can send a Volcanic from your hand to the graveyard and then draw, so it's essentially a free draw because a lot of the Volcanics, you don't really lose anything by discarding them anyway. And then if it's in the graveyard, you can banish it out of the graveyard to act as a Foolish Burial effect. So I kind of mentioned earlier, there's a few different things you can do. In the combos at the end of this video, you'll see you can search it to your hand as a discard for a bomb token effect with the Trooper, and then it's in the graveyard to act as that Foolish Burial effect if you need it. Otherwise, you can wait and use it as a Foolish Burial effect to send the Scatter Shot to make it a Raigeki, something like that. Or if you just want that extra draw, you know, that on top of Morganite is 3 draws per turn. That's kind of ridiculous. I don't know that you need that necessarily. Really, the Foolish Burial effect is probably where you're going to get the most value. Into the extra deck, we've got the one Artemis the Magistus Moon Maiden. You just link off the Alistair to summon this, and now it's a light target to make Makaba. The one link Karibo, it's a dark target to make the Caliga. It also is a little bit of battle phase protection, so you can keep some your stuff safe. It also can, if you have the Rimfire in hand, you can special summon it off the Accelerator and then tribute it to put the link Karibo back on board, so that you get that protection effect again, and then also get the Rimfire effect. So a couple of different things you can do with that. Anima, because it sucks. The one SP Little Knight, because it is the best Link 2 generic removal in the game. The one IP Masquerena, because a lot of this is going to be burning and then controlling and playing on your opponent's turn with the IP Masquerena. So there's a combo at the end of this video where you're going to pass turn with Emperor, Masquerena, Inferno, Volcanic Blaze Accelerator. The idea being that you would pass the turn, you can link away your Volcanic Emperor because you're just going to summon it back the next turn anyway, search the other trap card, and you can either make like Goddess of the Closed World because it's a removal of one of their monsters. You can make the Nightmare Unicorn just with your own monsters and then discard to, you know, bounce something. So Masquerena is a pretty useful card to play at like offense or defensively while still setting you up for the following turn because Emperor has such good recursion. So I've been liking that. The one Hita, the Fire Charmer Ablaze, this thing seems like it sucks. I really have not understood why people play the Fire Charmer or the Charmer links in like attribute-based decks, because they just don't seem to do anything unless it's the dark or light one, because people play dark and light monsters a lot more commonly. Either way, if it dies, you get the search for the fire monster, so whatever. I would cut this for something else if you can think of something else better to play. The one Doolittle Chimera, I like this way better than the Charmer. All fire monsters gain 500 attack and defense, so instead of making like the IP play that you'll see at the end of the video, you can make any Link 2 in that instance, and you can just make this thing, and now your Emperor's got 3,400 attack. So if it's later in the game, I suppose, you would have like huge damage you could do. It also sits at 50 attack points higher than this under its own effect, and then it also has that recursion effect. When it gets destroyed, target a fire monster in graveyard, add it back to your hand. So I like this thing way better than this. You could probably cut both of them and play something else entirely. We've got the one Flame Tongue, the Blazing Magical Blade. This thing's pretty cool. So it protects your spell and traps. All the spell and traps you control can't be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. Also, you can target one of your banished fire monsters, add it to your hand, and if you do, you cannot activate that monster's card effects for the rest of that turn. So if all else fails and you can't get the Emperor back because this gets popped or whatever, you can just banish it off of an invocation to make the Purgatrio, and then you can just make the Flame Tongue and put it back in your hand and summon it again anyway. So lots and lots of ways to get this back. That's the main focus of the deck here. Protecting the back row is also pretty important because we need the Blaze Accelerator on board. Keeping the Inferno on board is really good. So this seems like a pretty easy inclusion. I could even see cutting this and bumping this to 2 because if it gets removed, making another one's pretty easy and very, very helpful. Then we got the one Sunlight Wolf. This is really just like a win more type of option, I would say. So if you've got gas in your hand and you have the ability to make the Link 2 play into with the Emperor, you would just Link 2 into this, summon the Emperor in the zone that it points to, and then get the search effect, and then you would keep playing based on what you had in your hand. Otherwise, I don't know that there's much of a use to play this because we're not playing any other Salamangreat, so it's not going to get its second effect ever. And the one Nightmare Unicorn, one of the best generic Link 3 removal cards in the game to go along with the Little Knight. The one Goddess of the Closed World because of that IP play we just talked about. And then our Invoked package. Makaba is your main one, so we can shut down pretty much any spell or monster at any point in time because the amount of search you have in this deck to get spells or monsters in your hand is pretty good. And I suppose even the traps. You can search the traps off of Trooper, but traps are probably less relevant for you to be worried about negating anyway. The one Caliga, because if you wanted to shift to a more controlling playstyle, you would put the Caliga on board with the Emperor and then just grind. So you would probably change the way you build the deck a little bit to a little bit more back row, more control-based cards. But even without that, Caliga plus Emperor plus Inferno is still a pretty good board as far as shutting your opponent down from being able to play stuff. The one Purgatrio, because it's fire, the deck is all fire, so it's really easy to have targets for it at all times. It also can be a good way to get over like a bigger board that maybe you fell behind because it gets that attack boost and it can attack everything. It also does piercing damage, so it can do a little bit of game-ending stuff there. So all around a pretty good choice in this deck, I'd say. And then the one Algaides, just as like a follow-up to Makaba, once you've shut a turn down and you get it back to your turn, you would summon the Alistair that you put back in your hand off the invocation the previous turn, unless you used it as like an Honest or whatever. Make this thing, and then banish the Makaba and attack with the 4800 or 4500 attack, as well as the Emperor, hopefully. And that's pretty close to game right there as it is. That's 7600 attack. So even if you've resolved just one burn effect at some point, that's game. So a good way to round out that extra deck. So that'll wrap up the list. I thought it was an interesting take on a Volcanic deck. If you've been playing around with this, let me know how you've been playing it. I've liked this build. I was trying to play it pure before. I just didn't like it that much. I really like the Invoked engine. It feels like it fits in here really well. The rest of this video is just going to be a couple of little combos that I put together with just like your generic Volcanic combos that I think are pretty common, as well as like what you're trying to set up with the Invoked engine with Makaba and Emperor. So check that out if you're interested. In the meantime, if you're opening some of that new legendary Duelist, Volcanic, whatever the hell it's called, good luck with that. I hope you pull that Ghost for a Salamangreat Sunlight Wolf, because there's really not much else in there that seems like it's really worth pulling. Happy deck building, and I will see you guys in the next one. Have a good one. Bye.